and then we can.
This meeting is being recorded.
Oh my. Julita, are we going to wait to let folks in? Is that the procedure?
Yes, we're waiting to let folks in for another 2 minutes. We'll start at 01. That's okay.
That sounds great. Yeah, but I mean, people might be, you know, sometimes people are, they might be like me. They have those challenges when they get on Zoom or.
Do we want to wait a couple more seconds?
Yeah, I think we'll wait if that's all right with John and Heidi. Just
Yeah, it
because
looks like there's 2 attendees now, so we just added another person. So let's, yeah, I agree, Commissioner. Let's
wait
wait
another
a minute
2 or
or
3.
2. Yeah, whatever you say.
Thanks to folks who are joining us, and we're going to wait a couple minutes to see if we have some more attendees before we get started. So appreciate your patience, and we'll get started here in a couple minutes, maybe 6:03, so another minute.
Heidi, are you enjoying Colorado?
I am. I love the snow. I've been so excited to be here with the snow. It's fantastic compared to North Carolina, where you get, you know, half an inch and then maybe an ice storm, and that's it. You know, so this is much better. This is much better.
So an old Peace Corps friend of mine, I wonder if you ever interacted with him. He taught biology and other kinds of science at Chapel Hill. Isn't that part of your area? No.
No, Chapel Hill's on the other end of the state from where Charlotte was located.
Okay. Okay. That's how
Yeah, I
much I know.
visited Charlotte. It's a big city. It's a really
Charlotte is
modern city because it's, you know, it's so new. I had fun there though.
Yeah. It's a great place to be. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed visiting, but I don't think I could live there just because I don't need tall buildings in my life.
Would you like to begin, Commissioner?
Sure, that sounds great. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Kristen Stevens, and I'm County Commissioner in District 2. And with me is John Kafalis, and he's a Commissioner in District 1. And I may let John, if you're all right with that, I may have you introduce Heidi, mostly because I want to give some kudos to John, who really got the climate framework going and really made those, you know, started the initiative, really kept it going until Jody and I came in and were elected and helped support him on that. But because this is his brainchild, so to speak, I'd love to have him kind of give some introductory remarks about Climate Smart, and then introduce Heidi, and then we can go into, Heidi can talk, and we can go into some Q&A, and we can also talk about other topics after that.
Yeah, thank you for your kind words, Kristen. So folks, our featured guest is Heidi Pruess, our Climate Smart Larimer County program manager, and I think environmental sustainability or something is in there. You can correct me if I didn't get your title absolutely right. But that's the main focus of our community conversation this evening, to get an update on our community engagement process, where we're at and how things are going, as I understand it, and certainly how this will help lead us into phase 3 of this initiative. So that's an introduction of Heidi Pruess. She came on board, I think, last August or so, and she's done a lot of outstanding work. I also want to introduce Jalitza Martinez, who is from our Public Affairs Office. And maybe before Heidi begins, Jalitza, do you want to share anything about how folks can ask questions or participate in that sort of thing?
Yes, thank you, John. I was just about to put it in the chat. So folks that have gotten the chance to attend tonight can submit their questions through the chat box, and that's going to be delivered to our panelists and myself, the host, not to other attendees. We can also use the Q&A, and you'll see that at the bottom of your screen. Oh, and then there's also a feature, sorry, that was my phone. There's also a feature for you to raise your hand if you'd like to speak live, and we'll allow you to unmute yourself so that you can ask your questions. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jalitza. So we'll turn it over to Heidi. She can introduce herself properly and provide us with an update, and then we'll certainly open it up for a dialogue and Q&A. And then, as Commissioner Stevens, as Kristen said, in whatever remaining time we have, we're happy to respond to other questions or give people updates on other things that the commissioners, the county's working on. Thank you.
Thank you for the introductions, and I'm very happy to be here this evening with you. I'm looking at the list of attendees, and many of you I know, and so this information I hope is not too repetitive for you, and I hope that you have some great questions for our commissioners this evening. That would be fantastic. So let me just share my screen. I'm going to give you an update, and I'm going to go a little quick through this because I really do think the majority of you have already seen or heard most of this already. Where's my slideshow? Here we go. And from the beginning, please. Here we go. All right. So Commissioner Kafalis was correct. My name is Heidi Pruess. I am the Climate Smart and Sustainability Program Manager, if you want to call it that, John. This presentation is a summary of where we are with the Climate Smart Larimer County initiative. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of what that is, why we're here, why we're having this conversation, and then I'll share how it is that you can get involved moving forward. And then hopefully you have some questions for us. That'd be great. So I have just a couple slides here with regard to why we're talking about Climate Smart in the first place. It's not that Larimer County hasn't been doing anything, have any programs at all with regard to climate and sustainability, because certainly we do. But there has been a realization that we are experiencing increased weather extremes. As you can see from this slide, this data is captured since 1953. Living here, you're familiar with this information. In addition to the big weather extremes and the natural disasters that we experience, we have day-to-day issues with our impacts that we're realizing from our climate changing. We have extreme heat days and prolonged and increased drought situations. And we know that these impacts from the climate changing are disproportionately impacting some members of our community. Should you have some health condition like asthma or lung disease, where our poor ozone or unhealthy air days impact you, then you are aware of this. There are other folks in our community who are disproportionately impacted because of either the kind of work that they do or where they live and their living conditions themselves, how they are able to get to and from their home to their workplace. So we realized that these changes in our climate are things that we need to address. And as I said before, we are taking action, but we could do a better job taking action, probably. There's always room for improvement. When we look at this slide with this background information, you'll note that with 60% of our population in this county living and working within the county, that affords us some flexibility, some true impact that we can have if we're going to look at, in particular, maybe how we move around this county. When you see these percentages that are less than 5%, less than 10% on different alternative modes of transportation, certainly there's room for improvement there. Similarly, with our waste diversion rate, we know that we can do better. So we are embarking on this mission to see how it is that we can improve and do a better job. In January of last year, so about a year ago, the Board of Commissioners adopted a framework document, and this document was created by staff within county departments. A variety of county departments got together and put together this framework document. It includes strategies for potential actions that could be taken, but the overarching recommendation in the framework was to go back out to the community, see what the community was going to say with regard to what are our priorities. What kind of actions should we be taking? Are we missing something in this framework document? So that's where we are right now. We're in this community outreach phase, and we are going to be in this phase through May, after which we will combine the information from that framework document in phase 1, the information we're gathering in phase 2, in addition to some research of best practices across the United States for similar programs. And we're going to launch into the nuts and bolts of plan development. What does implementation look like? What do those actions have partners maybe? And what are the goals that would go along with that? So it's not to say that community outreach stops with this phase that we're in right now. It will continue moving forward. It's just that community outreach and engagement is our focus right now. So a little bit more history, the framework document, these are the 6 areas that were broken into the framework document as far as structure goes. And if you take a look at these 6 areas, you'll see that they in fact mimic the department structure of county government. So as we went out to our public engagement, our series 1, which was a questionnaire that many of you already replied to and participated in, thank you very much. We heard a couple of things. One thing was, yes, we are feeling the impacts of a changing climate in Larimer County, and we could do something better about that. The other thing that we are still compiling all the information from are these 569 different ideas that you shared with us about what it is we could put into an implementation plan. So we have packaged those ideas together and compared those against the framework document to come up with some workshop areas that I'll describe here in a minute. We also heard in series 1 that when you think about climate smart, when you hear those words and you think about our plan, you think about sustainability, quality of life, and bettering that quality of life, resiliency and innovation. I think that those 4 top columns are very, very interesting and encouraging, because when we think about innovation, when we think about resiliency and quality of life, there's lots of opportunity for us to improve and have a positive outlook on the actions that we are going to take. So our engagement series number 2, which we are in right at this moment, is looking at these 4 areas. These are repackaging a little bit what those 6 areas in the framework document identified. And the idea here is to create these 4 priority areas that speak to both us as individuals, as well as to our organizations within our county around what kind of actions that we could take going into the future. So I'm not going to read this slide for you. You can do that. But this is where we are talking about strategies right now. And as we gather information in this phase, like I said, we'll analyze all the details. And the goal here is to have input at this phase that helps us get to prioritization, recommendations, so that we can take the next steps. So here's how you can get involved. Just a reminder, here are the 4 areas and what they are covering. We've had the first week of workshops already. So Tuesday and Wednesday this week, we had a series of workshops. Next week, we also have a series of workshops. So on the 15th and on the 16th, we'll be talking about nature and land, our well-being, and our homes and economy. And a session each evening on the 15th and 16th is also provided in Spanish. Now, just because maybe you haven't had an opportunity to go to a workshop, or maybe you wanted to talk about how we move, which we've already completed 2 sessions on that, doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to provide feedback. You do. If you go to our Climate Smart website, which is there listed at the top, and I believe in the chat, Jaleesa has added in for you information, both the connections to the page as well as the connections to the workshop registration link. That link is on this Get Involved tab here. And if I can go to the next page, I messed myself up here. There we go. So on this Get Involved tab, the workshop registration link is provided where those yellow stars are. But right below that is a link for the questionnaire. The questionnaire is how you can participate if you cannot attend the workshops. The questions there are identical to the questions that we are asking in the workshop. You just don't have the pleasure of listening to me talking about it. In addition to that, if you have already attended one of the workshops and you were thinking about ideas at night and have more input to provide, you can select that comment form. It does not walk through all the questions. It just allows you a space to leave comment. So you can choose any of those options. And should you go to the bottom of this page, there's a form available for you to sign up for our newsletter. And the newsletter is how you will be able to stay engaged as we transition from this phase 2 community engagement through our phase 3 of developing the implementation plan. So I encourage you to go to the website, sign up for the newsletter. Of course, you can always follow us on social media as well. There's all kinds of ways to contact us. And Jaleesa has more information in the chat there for you. So that's the long and the short of it. I try to keep it quick because you don't want to hear me talk. We want to hear you talk and give us your questions. So thank you. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks, Heidi. That was great. And I participated, or not really participated, but sort of observed one of the community sessions this week on our homes and economy, and it was really well attended, and there were some really great suggestions from the community. I was talking to Heidi this afternoon, and I said, you know, there were suggestions that I wouldn't have thought about. Like for example, one of the suggestions was, you know, contacting businesses about not carrying clothing products that are made of synthetic, you know, like trying to, you know, and I mean, just some really sort of out of the box ideas that everybody came with. So I think that those sessions will be really helpful for us going forward as we kind of look at different ways that we can, you know, change behaviors and help people get on board. So, but I was really pleased with the amount of people that were attending and really actively participating in the conversation. So, and like I said, there were gray water was discussed, you know, air quality, which is something that we're working on. And we've had a lot of community members come to us about lately. And just, I think a lot of things about food waste and composting. And so the suggestions have been really great. And So I would encourage, I know that the folks that are here today are probably attending some of those meetings and have been participants, but if you can bring friends along and others and encourage other people to participate, that would be great, because we definitely want to have representatives from all different parts of the community. So, and I'm glad and I did not know we had some Spanish speaking opportunities coming up for our Spanish speaking communities, which is really wonderful too. So any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A or raise your hand.
I'll share with you that for the folks that are attending this evening, you should know that there have been a couple plans that are not necessarily plans, but suggestions that have been made by other components throughout Larimer County that we are starting to take a look at and will be integrating into our implementation plan analysis going forward. For instance, Estes Valley just recently had an environmental sustainability task force that produced a report with all kinds of ideas that are important for that part of Larimer County. So we are trying to reach into that part of the county for their feedback in this process, but we also want to take advantage of the recent reports that have been done within those counties and know that their specific feedback is unique to their situation, wherever they may be. And so that's important. Similarly, CSU just adopted their greenhouse gas inventory update and their strategies that are going forward. Things that we can learn from, in addition to the existing Fort Collins plan, which is has been around for a long time and it has lots of great experience. So we're gleaning information from those resources, as well as just conducting this outreach for different groups. For those who are not able to attend our work groups, and maybe if we aren't getting the representation that we would like to see that's represented from the county, we are identifying opportunities for us to have some unique workshops that are geared just for components of our community that maybe an evening workshop doesn't work. For instance, our youth. And so we're targeting some of those groups to try to understand the best way for them to be able to provide feedback in the situation that they're in.
It looks like there's a question in the Q&A that's perhaps directed towards Kristen or Commissioner Stevens. I had two questions that I wanted to offer, but I'll hold off on that. And as best as we can respond to this, I think that would be good.
Right. So I see a question from Kirk, and it says, can I share any updates from the North Front Range Metropolitan Planning Organization, how they'll start to consider greenhouse gas emissions with new transportation projects, and will this work be included within Climate Smart? So I'll attempt to answer the first one first, and then Heidi can kind of jump in on how we'll kind of incorporate those ideas with Climate Smart. But so Kirk and some of you may know that the Colorado legislature last year passed House Bill 260 or Senate Bill 260. I think it's Senate Bill 260. And that was a big transportation bill, like kind of one of these omnibus bills. But within it, there was requirements for transportation planning areas across the state to incorporate or to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by certain amounts in I think the first milestone is 2025 and then 2030 and 2050 or 20, and so there's these requirements. So when you do your transportation planning and you're planning for any kind of project that has regional significance, you have to show how it reduces greenhouse gas emissions, or you won't be eligible for dollars that come through the state, through the federal government, to be able to do these projects. And so we are on our metropolitan planning organization needs to prove how our projects that are coming forward in the next year. So by October, we have to have modeling done at the I'm just going to call it MPO level to make sure that these projects fall under these reductions, or that there's some mitigations that we've proven that reduce greenhouse gas emissions instead. And so we have to follow those rules, Kirk, as of this October. And so, that modeling will be done at the MPO level. Certainly that's not my expertise, but we will be looking at these projects. And if the projects don't, if the projects don't reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we simply won't get those dollars to be able to do those projects. And we will have to implement more multimodal options within a project, or, like I said, prove that we've mitigated for some of these for the greenhouse gas emissions. So also Dr. Cog, which is the Denver Regional Commission of Governments, or some.
Actually, it's the Council of Governments.
Council of Governments also falls under those rules this year. And then MPOs and TPRs, transportation regions throughout the state, will have to abide by the rules in the following year. And so it's a kind of a new environment for us in transportation planning, because, big projects a lot of projects that people are familiar with, like I-25 expansion to a third lane, those kind of capacity building projects probably cannot necessarily prove that they reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we'll really have to work on, different ways to commute and to get around and to get our goods around. And so I think it's a tall order, but it's certainly something we need to start working on. And there's urgency, around this issue. So we will be working on it in the MPO. The Senate Bill 260 also created a couple of enterprises, one of which I serve on, which is the Non-Attainment Area Pollution Mitigation Enterprise. And that enterprise will be collecting fees from delivery services like Amazon and others, and shared ride services, and we'll have in the next year a budget of about $7 million, but going forward, significantly higher budgets, and we'll be able to address greenhouse gases with those dollars. So there is a significant amount of money coming into the state for transportation, but it will largely have to be used on projects that can show that they're reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And how it will fit in the Climate Smart, I don't know if Heidi wants to address that. It's certainly one of the areas that we'll be working on, regionally, is how to make sure our projects, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and how we're going to have to increase transit probably by 8% every year to be able to meet those greenhouse gas rules. And so I think that they definitely fit together. I don't know if that we've discovered exactly how at this point, but certainly, anything we can. And transportation is one of the largest greenhouse gas emitters in the state. And yes, EVs will be a piece of that. I don't think EVs alone will get us there quickly enough, honestly. And so we'll have to, transit is really important. Other modes of transportation are really important as well. But yes, there's EVs are a piece of that.
I'll just add, with regard to Climate Smart, we do have a task force. That task force is guiding us along the way and will be helping us to shape the priorities and the guidance that is ending up in our phase 2 final report. This task force includes a member of the MPO, and the idea here is we are beginning to create partnerships for discussion on all kinds of mitigation and adaptation actions that can be taken across the county, across a variety of different topics. So the goal here is not to replace or repeat necessarily what is in an existing plan. The transportation plans that are existing today will be updated as the new rules and as the new modeling and and the specifics around how money is distributed will all be included and updated into those plans for sure. The Climate Smart connection will be around what kind of special strategies do we need to focus on that help us get to the goals there that are identified either in the MPO transportation plan or within our comprehensive plan that links in with that plan as well, or with any of the other plans that we might have that would impact how we move, for instance, which is one of the 4 areas that we're focusing in on. So it's a connection point rather than a replacement is what I would say about Climate Smart. I hope that helps.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask my 2 questions. I think my first question is a good segue to this conversation about transportation. And in your presentation, Heidi, which was excellent, and hopefully we can get those slides. I'd like to get a copy of the slide presentation, and I don't know if that's posted on the website. It's really good information. But in your presentation, you identified the 6 planning areas that we came up with in the Climate Smart Larimer County framework. But one of the things that you didn't speak to was the greenhouse gas profiling or the greenhouse gas management. And I wonder if you could provide some more details, because I think that fits into the conversation we just had. You know, my understanding of that is that we will have specific action items eventually to look at how we can do a baseline, you know, in terms of, I think the last time we did some kind of inventory of greenhouse gas emissions was in 2017. And so my understanding, and please correct me if I'm not right, is that we want to update that baseline, and that would help us to establish targets or greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals, you know, for 2030 perhaps and beyond. So I wonder if you could speak to that, and then I have a second question, if I may.
Absolutely, sure. Well, you actually have the expert with regard to the greenhouse gas inventory as one of your attendees, because Kirk has had a significant hand in the writing and the development of that last inventory. So what I will share with you is that Larimer County has had 2 greenhouse gas inventories to date. One was in 2011, and then the one that is most recent was 2018 was finalized. You are correct that it is time for an update. It is time for a refresh, because even when you look at those 2 greenhouse gas inventories, the results were very different. The first one indicating that the landfill was the largest contributor to our greenhouse gases. The second one, the most recent one, focusing instead on the transportation, on our vehicles. So the other thing we know is that the calculations and the way in which greenhouse gas inventories are evolving over time is including more and more structure and calculation around some of the things that we might really want to understand their greenhouse gas contribution within Larimer County. Things like how we utilize our land, our agricultural systems, those kinds of things. So there's more to be learned, and certainly within the coming year, we are hopeful. We are applying for a grant that may allow us to continue not only with our implementation plan, but with the development of an updated greenhouse gas inventory and some of these other tools that we need. So Kirk is adding into the chat here that the first inventory organization was specific. The second was community-wide. So there are changes. Kirk is exactly right. And so we will be looking to update it with the best technology that we have so it can inform our strategies. You are correct, Commissioner Kapalus.
Thank you, Heidi. I'd like to ask my second question, and that pertains to these outreach, these community outreach workshops or sessions. Kristen mentioned that she attended one. I believe I'm planning to attend the well-being one next week. Is there, from these sessions, these outreach sessions, is there a way to determine which who's at these meetings? I mean, it sounds like it was well attended, but I'm wondering if there's a way to determine, well, this sector of our community was represented, that kind of thing, from the business sector, or, from the nonprofit sector, or for, from the home builder sector. I mean, can you speak to that at all? Do we have that
Absolutely.
kind of information?
Yep, you didn't receive the registration link the same way everyone else in the community did, so you wouldn't be aware. Folks in the community, when they select the registration link for the workshops, have a series of questions that we're asking them to try to capture exactly that information. So we're asking for zip code information, we're asking for demographic information, so that we know that these are the folks who have signed up. In addition to that, the questionnaire mimics those same pieces of information that we're looking for, in addition to just their feedback on the strategies. So it's going to be helpful when we complete these workshops going forward to look at that data and know where it is that we need to do a little bit better job with some targeted or directed outreach to those in the community that maybe we're still missing feedback from. Good, he says. Thank you, he says. Okay. Excellent. Other questions? Anything from Cindy, Joyce, or Vicky? Kirk, you can ask another question too. I didn't mean to exclude you.
Kirk is generally very good at asking very informative questions.
I guess I also wanted to talk to something that's somewhat, related to this topic, which is we've had a lot of folks that have come to us in the past week asking about air quality, voicing their concerns about air quality, ozone, also emissions from oil and gas. And so I don't know if folks had a chance to watch our workshop or our work session that we had on Tuesday, Monday, when I get
On Monday, actually.
Monday. Okay, you can tell the days have blurred together for me this week, but we had a work session that was really informative from our Department of Health and Environment about different options for air quality monitoring that we could do. And long story short, there are a lot of different options, and so we're going to really explore some of those options, including options in partnership with the city of Fort Collins on potentially an ozone stations and ozone stations throughout the county, especially some in the southern part of the county. Also some monitoring around some oil and gas, known kind of oil and gas production facilities. So potentially exploring like the FLIR camera, which captures sort of methane emissions and benzene emissions from oil and gas. So there's a lot of concern around oil and gas emissions, but also in general ozone. We're in an ozone non-attainment area, and we're in serious violation of EPA standards at this point. And that is also part of the reason that we're looking at these mitigation measures with the greenhouse gas emissions. If we can lower our greenhouse gas emissions, we'll also lower our ozone. They're almost always the same contributors to both. And so, but really kind of getting an idea of what our air quality is like, what we need to work on, what sources are contributing to our bad air quality. And so really trying to get a handle on that. So that's process is ongoing, and we'll work with the Department of Health to see which method works best for us, what's the most financially feasible, and which will capture the kind of data that we need to be able to make decisions, and that we can pass on to CDPHE, the Colorado Department of Health and Environment, and to really change some of these issues. So that is ongoing as well.
Kristen, may I add something? A couple of things?
Oh, please do.
And then maybe I can give another update that I think directly and indirectly is relevant to this discussion about adaptation mitigation regarding changing climate and all the implications. If anyone is interested, so we had the work session on Monday, and there was a really great slide presentation, And if anyone is interested in receiving that, plus the January 10th, I think it was like an 8-page memo that provided 5 options that we discussed on Monday, pros and cons, benefits, challenges, et cetera. That I'm happy to share that with folks, the slide presentation. And then there was some follow-up. I think one of the next steps, it is ongoing, but there will be some conclusions and some final recommendations in figuring out how we're going to pay for some of these things or cost share. But I think our public health director, Tom Gonzalez, he talked about one of the next steps is to present this information to the Larimer County Board of Health. They do other things besides deal with COVID. And so hopefully we'll be able to focus on some of these other areas a little bit more. But I think they're scheduled to get the presentation on March 22nd. And then so they can have buy-in and they can provide their expertise. But then ultimately we'll get more refined and specific recommendations. And then, within the next few months, I think, and then ultimately we'll determine how do we partner with the city, the Colorado State University, and to address, what needs to be addressed in Larimer County as far as, real-time air quality monitoring and so forth. So there's some good, the slide presentation, the memo, the follow-up from our public health person, Chris Manley. I think Kirk may have received that as a member of the Environmental and Science Advisory Board. And of course, they've been incredibly helpful providing information and data and options and engaging CSU, Boulder County air quality folks and so on. So I just I hope that's okay, Commissioner. I wanted to share that. And then the other quick update I'll mention, and you can help me with this, Kristen, is on Wednesday, I believe that was yesterday. Yes, the days get a bit blurry for all of us, I think. One of the work sessions that we had yesterday, we do a lot of work sessions, and the purpose of work sessions is to get information mostly from staff, and that helps inform us, when we have to make decisions about particular things. We don't make decisions at work sessions, but we give direction. So the one that we had 2 on Wednesday, but the one that I think is, well, it's all relevant to these discussions, but we had an update on our broadband strategic initiative, and we were presented with an updated broadband strategic plan. It's a 42-page document, and there's a lot of really exciting and tangible stuff in there, frankly, and we've made great progress in building partnerships with the City of Fort Collins and Connection, the City of Loveland Pulse, and Estes Park has, Trailblazer, I believe it's called up there. So that's another thing that folks should be aware of, because we actually have a game plan, and there's a lot of federal dollars and state dollars available to help us with some of this infrastructure investment. And our goal, and I think it's not a guarantee, but it's fairly realistic in the next number of years, we could achieve the goal of making sure that everyone in the county has access to high-speed internet, and this digital divide, would do a much better job of addressing it. So I think that's incredibly exciting, frankly.
Well, and there is a tie-in clearly with climate, change. I mean, for folks to be able to access telemedicine instead of having to run to the doctor or working from home and not having to drive a single occupancy vehicle to their workplace. I think that there's, it's good for so many reasons, right? It's good for equity, it's good for learning opportunities, but it also really is great for, folks who might not have to make that drive if they have internet access. And so,
and of course, exciting. Transportation is one of the biggest sources of the pollution, the air pollution, and certainly contributing to ozone non-attainment. And on Wednesday there was a regional meeting of the Weld County and the Larimer County workforce development boards, and one of the points that was made, that I made, I suppose, was that every day between Larimer County and Weld County, people are commuting to work. The number of people commuting to work is the equivalent of the population of Loveland. I don't know if anyone knows off the top of their head what the population of Loveland is. You get the idea that it's an awful lot of folks going back and forth between the two counties, because either they live over there because maybe the housing is cheaper, and then they come to Larimer County, or vice versa. And that has tremendous impacts on air quality. and, you know, time away from family and children and that sort of thing. I'll be quiet now, Commissioner.
No, I think this is great.
I'll just add that the process of developing this climate smart implementation plan is one in which we're trying to discover where these connections are made and how it is that we can amplify the work that is being done in the variety of different plans that are already going on. The good news is that we aren't waiting for this plan. Clearly, you just heard there are many examples of where action is continuing to move forward. We're continuing to take thoughtful steps within our individual programs to understand how we can meet the needs as fast as possible. But there are opportunities that will likely arise because we're looking at these plans together and trying to understand what everyone's role within the county is going to be as we implement these mitigation and adaptation steps going forward. The other thing that might come up is that there may be these conflicts that are identified between these plans that are being developed. And so it'll be helpful to have the priorities and the connection between the plans as we move forward to help us manage not only the opportunities and realize efficiencies there, but understand where these conflicts are so we can break those barriers down and we can really understand how we can achieve as much of everything that we want as we can get, right? Yeah, so Kirk's question here is exactly what I'm trying to get at. Yes, the Climate Smart plan and priorities will inform the existing plans, and those existing plans, as they get updated, will inform the Climate Smart plan. And it's meant to be an iterative, long-term venture to be sure that we are collaborating as best we can, particularly across these jurisdictional boundaries that we made up and the environment doesn't realize. And so we are going to be continuing to link those things together as we go forward.
And yeah, I think, you know, to the questions or the comments, the questions that Kirk is placing in the chat or somewhere, 2 points I would make. One is regarding the, you know, certainly we just got done updating the land use code phase 2, and that can always be adjusted as we go forward. So yes, you know, the Climate Smart will help inform any needed adjustments to our land use code. You know, one of the things that we're working on in parallel with the land use code work is, you know, our planning people, our community development folks, you know, we did secure a couple of grants that's helping us do the foundational work on that will ultimately lead to developing a water master plan. And we all know that, you know, water issues are really critical. And I think Heidi talked about, obviously with the drought that we've been experiencing, the higher temperatures, you know, certainly the historic disaster emergency. So that's one thing that folks should be aware of. We'll get some analysis and some outcomes from this assessment that's being done right now on water-related issues that relate to ag and just so many other things. That's important. And then, you know, in our comprehensive plan, one of the themes or one of the areas, Estes Park folks last night referred to them as resiliency themes, which I think is a great messaging, but it's housing. And you'll recall that last year we did, you know, we're trying to do more in that space. And we did get an initial analysis from the Root Policy Research Company out of Denver, and that made some broad recommendations on what the county's role might be in, you know, in the housing arena, which is so critical in terms of the, you know, the built environment and walkability and livability, and especially with all of us getting older and crankier, you know, making it easier, having options to get to the grocery store or some other places makes an awful lot of sense. So we just, I think we were approved another grant from the Department of Local Affairs that will help us to identify a consultant and research firm to take those broad recommendations and develop a sort of a housing strategic plan, hopefully by the fall or so. and that will give us some tangible things we can do there. And we're always wanting to make the connections or the linkages with, the climate smart, the transportation stuff. So I offer those two thoughts.
Yeah, I also want to say with regard to what Heidi said is we aren't waiting on this work. And so with regard to the our land use code, we just in some of the more recent adoptions, I mean, we required EV charging stations. We put in requirements into the land use code that so if you have a certain amount of parking spaces, a certain percentage need to be there needs to be EV chargers, and then a certain percentage needs to be EV ready, and a certain percentage needs to be EV compatible. I mean, there were 3 categories, but we had sent the code back to say we really want to look at best practices across the state and recommendations around this, because we want this infrastructure in place as we move forward. EV ready, thank you, Kirk. EV ready, right? And we didn't want things to just be EV ready. We wanted some charge. I mean, the minute we have, a place with 10 parking spaces, one of those needs to have the charging station right away, because some of the hesitancy around purchasing electric vehicles is around, I'm in Colorado, I might go to a rural place, I might go to a recreational place, and I don't have a place to charge my EV. And we didn't want that to be a problem in Larimer County. And so also with the building code, Kirk, you know that we made building code regulations that where all new buildings have to have EV charge, have to be EV ready, garages have to be EV ready, energy efficiency and new building codes. So certainly we're not done with that work, but I mean, we had that in mind as we were looking at land use code changes already, with not with using native grasses and not having grass at commercial businesses and different kinds of things like that. So it's something that we've kind of had in the back of our mind. Now, can we do better? Absolutely. I'm sure there are other changes we need to make, and it'll be great to go through the process and do that. We're totally willing to open the land use code back up to make those changes. But I feel like we have been making changes all along, knowing that we need to do this work.
And colleagues, I have another question or a comment, but I think I'd like to pause. I know we're getting towards the 7 o'clock, but other folks who have been good listeners, I wonder if there are other questions or comments that you would like to share. And certainly, Kirk, thank you for your engagement and for your knowledge. You've been a really instrumental partner in all of these deliberations. But I just wanted to give an opportunity for some of the other folks, Joyce, Vicky, others that are on. And again, if you're comfortable just listening and hopefully this is helpful to you, then we've achieved, we've added some value, to what we're trying to do to reach out to the community. But maybe it's good to pause for a moment. Thank you. Thank you. Well, Commissioner, have we adequately paused?
I think we've adequately paused, yeah.
Just some food for thought, and I don't know if we'll have time to really get into it, but for Heidi, with the Climate Smart and Sustainability Program Manager, I don't know if you want to touch on how we're approaching all of this stuff, in terms of the community and how we can partner with the community responsibilities. But we've also determined that the county as an organization, we have to model what we're suggesting the community, businesses and residents and all that needs to do. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what we're doing internally, with our buildings and with our water fountains and I don't know, stuff like that.
Sure, I'd be glad to. And I was just working today on, we are creating a timeline to try to capture the point of a lot of this discussion, which is there's a lot going on already. So how can we capture what's going on already within county programs, within county facilities and whatnot, and then be able to do something more? We are developing a simultaneous to what's happening with the Climate Smart initiative, an internal plan, a reflection on maybe there are things that we can do to take care of our own house. So there are things that we can do in the community. Those should be reflected in the Climate Smart initiative. And then there are things that we can do to be on our best behavior as well. And those are going to be reflected in our internal plan. That plan will likely be able to bring some priorities to the commissioners for their thoughts early in the spring. And so that's really exciting because I think the departments are happy about the ability to talk across departments to find some solutions for those actions that maybe they've been wondering about themselves. Like maybe you work in engineering and you want to know what open spaces are doing or the like. And so we're having some really rich dialogue that's going on internally across departments right now. We're also talking about how is it that we can look at the climate kinds of initiatives, which we know often disproportionately impact different parts of our community. How can we integrate that into our internal plan? So we're kind of having a simultaneous discussion around those issues. One of the things that's popping up, which is also popping up in part of our structure for the external climate plan, is that it's not just rule changes that are going to be required going forward. We have incentive programs, we have educational programs, we have partnerships. There are all kinds of things that we need to do simultaneously in order to be able to have the best and most profound impact that we can have while we're joining these things together. So you might see some priorities and some suggestions for some rule changes like what you've been talking about right now with the code updates. But you may also see some suggestions coming forward that are this is one of the things we heard in our first questionnaire for the community, and what we're hearing even internally with staff is that we need more information. We don't know exactly what is the status of some folks don't know how much energy do we use. Some folks don't know how much water are we using. Are we conserving any land? There's just a lack of a combined spot for some of that educational resource. So we are working to do that internally so that as we transition from the hearing from the community to now creating the implementation plan and bringing things out to the community, that we can share some of that information in a way, excuse me, that's helping us get at the appropriate mitigation and adaptation steps that we'll be able to realize in the community. So it's exciting work. I think we're going to make good progress, and it's fun to be able to marry all this together.
So I think in closing on my part, and then Commissioner Stevens, whatever, of course, you wish to share, you can tell our level of enthusiasm is pretty elevated here, because these are topics that I think are really high priorities for the three of us, the three commissioners. For future discussion, and if you have other ideas, in terms of who we could invite to future community conversations, our turnout has not been great. And if you have any advice on that, we're trying to adjust things. But, Commissioner Stevens and I, we do this tag team thing, our Fort Collins one, and we've been exploring with that. And if it's, so please keep in mind any advice you can give us on how we can reach more people. Eventually we'll go to in-person again, but for future topics for your consideration, and if this is something you'd like us to, invite people like Heidi, solid waste, there's a lot of stuff happening on solid waste recycling and diversion that is also, fairly groundbreaking. If folks would want to hear more details about what we're doing with the broadband strategic plan, there's some really groundbreaking stuff there. And we're actually doing stuff, getting fiber in the ground and working with Connection and some of those groups. And whatever other topics you folks think would be helpful. I'll stop there. Thank you.
No, I agree. And yeah, please feel free to reach out, and Jalitza might be able to put our emails in the chat. but you can also find them online and or our phone numbers. You know, we're happy to talk to people or meet with small groups. And, you know, I like that John said that our work on broadband was groundbreaking, because literally we will have to be breaking some ground to install fiber. It wasn't intentional, so that's all right. But just wanted to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and thank Heidi, our guest, for being with us. And thank Jalitza Martinez. For those of you who don't know her, she's really helped our department a lot with outreach, especially to the Latinx community, and really helped us get our outreach to Spanish-speaking members of our community. And so she's a really invaluable member of our team as well. And so she's a rising star in the county, and we just wanted to thank her for being here with us tonight and helping us moderate the discussion.
And, you know, Kristen and Jalitza, I'm sure you saw the comment, but, you know, Kirk made a good point, Kirk Longstein. 6 o'clock is dinner time. And I guess we should sit down and process that and determine, you know, what other, that might be one thing we could do is shift this. I mean, I used to do these on a Saturday, and I know that's tough, but 6 o'clock is dinner time, and I bet that gets in the way. So let's give that some thought, please.
Definitely, we will. So thanks everyone for coming. It's good to see you all, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Heidi.